I've been wanting to make this video for a long time. I've been collecting my thoughts, penning them down, and refining them so that it doesn't seem like a rant. And I wanted to make sure that I communicate that to you in a meaningful manner. So I've done a little bit of George Lucas, and I'm actually making episode 0 of my series, my transition to Leica and the L mount, after I recorded the first 3 episodes. Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kamal Chilaka. I'm a photographer based out of Chennai, India. I make videos about the art of photography and photography gear that I have used or tested. Okay, why did I decide to move from Canon, which I've been shooting with over 20 years, ever since I was in my 20s really, to Leica and the L mount? The thought of moving from Canon to an alternate system has been brewing in my head for quite some time. At least for 4 or 5 years. I think the initial thought came into my head after the launch of the A7R. No, actually really after the launch of the Canon 5D Mark IV and the 5D SR, which themselves came pretty late and came out with some disappointing specs, even though the 5D SR and 5D Mark IV, I've used them intensively for the last few years, and before I got rid of the 5D SR last year, and I still have my 5D Mark IV. But they were just lagging behind in terms of number of specs and what you can do with these cameras as compared to the newer breed of mirrorless cameras from Sony, Fuji, some of the medium format manufacturers, and even Leica. This is not a whimsical move. This is a thought and process years in the making. I've been a Canon shooter for a little over 20 years, right from when I was in my 20s. So I have immense respect for Canon cameras that I've used over the last few years, right from the film cameras. I had a Rebel, and then I had the Elan 7, the original EOS camera, which has those 3 eye-operated focusing points. I still have that. I still shoot film on it. And after that, I progressed, except for a brief foray into Nikon Coolpix series. I pretty much been shooting on Canon, starting with the 10D, the original crop sensor DSLR, then the 5D, and every iteration of the 5D ever since. And it had been mostly pleasant sailing with Canon cameras. There's some stellar models like the original 5D, the 5D Mark II, which revolutionized DSLR video shooting, the 5D Mark III, which was again a revolutionary camera, and the 5D Mark IV and the 5D SR, more evolutionary products rather than revolutionary. I think the decline started at that point. The thought really came to my mind after I got a chance to buy and use the original Sony A7R. It was a camera with its own problems, bad ergonomics, very poor battery life for outdoor use. As a landscape photographer, it just didn't work for me. But the one thing that it did do was to impress me with the image quality from that sensor. The image straight of the camera were fantastic, and the dynamic range and the resolution, sharpness were amazing. And if not for all the other points, I probably would have continued to use that camera. I ended up eventually sold that camera within 6 months of my buying the camera. But it definitely left this thought in my head that Canon had begun to fall behind in terms of technology and also the image quality coming out of its sensors. And right from that moment, I think Canon has been lagging behind. I'm talking about the year 2013, 2014, when original A7R came out, so roughly around the last 5-6 years. I think Canon was competitive with the 5D SR and 5D Mark IV up to a point, maybe till 2014, 2015. But then with the advent of the Nikon D850, with its higher dynamic range and sharpness and resolving power. On the flip side, the Canon's first digital, mirrorless offering, the EOS R, which I found was completely underwhelming for me. There was absolutely no reason for me to shift the Canon EOS R from the 5D Mark IV or the 5D SR It just didn't make any sense having to change the mount or adapt lenses and get really nothing much more out of the camera than I'm already getting with the 5D Mark IV. Back, see, as a fine art photographer, image quality, resolution are very, very important for me, because most of my work is printed. It's printed in large format, and it's exhibited in front of people at galleries or on art fairs, and finally ends up in as prints in the homes of people, either in the homes or offices of art collectors. So for me, resolution and image quality is important. And from a workflow perspective, obviously don't want to spend too much time working on the files. I want the files to be as flexible and malleable as possible, but at the same time having minimum work, post-processing work after the shoot. And there began my search for a better system. After the 5D Mark III, the two cameras that I had and used, especially the 5D SR, which was the Canon's high resolution offering, and the Canon 5D Mark IV, which was an improvement in terms of low light performance and dynamic range over the 5D SR and the 5D Mark III. So there was no one camera which could do everything that I wanted, that is high resolution, high dynamic range, good low light performance, and all the bells and whistles that modern mirrorless cameras can offer these days. So like focus peaking, the focus as features, especially in shooting manually. So there began my search for Canon's next offering, which never really came till very, very recently in terms of the R5, and that too in 2020, whereas the wait has been on for me since 2016. So I was getting really fed up with Canon's ever lengthening product cycles and lackluster offerings, and all what seemed like purposeful sabotaging of features within the camera, and they simply didn't have the technology or the features, did not see fit to bring in features which other camera manufacturers were offering. So like IBIS, mirrorless technology, focus peaking, and better autofocus performance. Also the autofocus performance in Canon, the dual pixel autofocus in the Canon 5D Mark IV is excellent. In fact, I'm shooting this video on it right now with my 20mm Sigma lens, and I've never had. So for me, the focusing part is just one part, only for my portrait photography work that comes into play. But for my landscape work, for my travel photography, autofocus really doesn't matter. So that was a much less important feature for me. But it was all the other features which I mentioned earlier. Meanwhile, what is happening is many of the manufacturers started moving to mirrorless technology, and there were a bunch of adapters being brought out to accommodate different lenses on different bodies, and there was a whole lot of disruption happening for the big two, especially Canon and Nikon. But in all this confusion and disruption, I noticed this one camera company that really had a vision and really focused on what was important for photographers in terms of both the technology and quality. And that company, surprisingly, was Leica. Right from the time they introduced the Leica Q, I think in 2015, and shortly after that the Leica SL, they had stellar offerings. I mean, if you look at Leica's lineup right now, they have cameras for everybody, it looks like. They have excellent APS-C cameras on the TL series. They have the Leica Q and the Leica Q2 more recently, which are fantastic point and shoots and kind of a gateway into the Leica camera system. And they have the Leica M system for traditional Leica shooters, and they have the best versions of them right now in terms of the M10P and the M10R, which is their recent high resolution offering, and also the M10 monochrome, which is a 40 megapixel high resolution monochrome camera. Apart from that, they have the SL2 has been launched. They have the SL2, which is more of a mainstream camera, probably their most mainstream camera, with the interchangeable lens system, full frame, interchangeable, high resolution, high dynamic range, mirrorless. Everything, almost everything that one would need in today's cameras is built into the SL2. including a fair amount of weather sealing, and the design is fantastic. Look at this. How slim is that body? Solid construction. It's like a metal unibody construction. Minimal button layout. Fantastic ergonomics. Takes a little getting used to when you're coming from a camera with a lot of buttons like the 5D Mark IV, but once you get used to it, it just simplifies the way you shoot. So looking at all this, I was getting attracted more and more to Leica. So I actually picked up the Leica QP first last year when it was on sale and then I decided to instead of the Q2, even though the Q2 had already been launched, the QP was on sale, and for the purpose that I had in mind for this camera, I really didn't need the 47 megapixel resolution. The 24 megapixel resolution was fine because it's going to be like a backup travel camera, which I used for capturing some of the more casual kind of shoots during my travel photography. But when it came to my main system, I needed the higher resolution for my commercial work, for my fine art work, and for my personal projects. This is the camera that made the most sense. But I was still waiting and watching because the Canon R5 and the R6 were rumored and finally announced, and it finally looked like Canon was going to bring out the answer to all the Canon users' prayers in terms of a modern mirrorless camera with higher resolution and good dynamic range, hopefully. So I waited till the R5 was launched and officially announced and made available before actually placing the order for the R5, because through all the marketing and reviews of the camera that came out immediately after its launch, in terms of overheating of the video system of the R5 in terms of video performance, the way it had been crippled because of its body didn't have that kind of heat dispersion capabilities, so it was limited in terms of what it could do in terms of video. And Canon completely focused on the video features of the camera, and there was really hardly any information on the camera's performance as a photography tool. So it was disappointing for me in the sense I didn't get a chance to use the camera. I didn't see too many reviews which spoke about there were not very good reviews about the Canon R5, although I personally haven't tested, to be honest, and it could be an excellent camera. And I hope I will do a shootout of the Canon R5 versus the SL2 in an upcoming video. But based on the information and also the product cycles, because the SL2 was available since last year, and the R5 has just been announced, which means even if I bought the R5 today instead of the SL2, I would have to wait that much longer, and probably Leica would have already brought out their SL2 or SL3 or whatever the next replacement may be much before Canon, from what has happened in the last few years. So I didn't want to take that chance. I wanted to be I wanted to have that cutting edge technology on my hands. I wanted to have the best features. I wanted to have a tool from the most focused company in my hands. So that's why I finally decided to go for the SL2. So before zeroing in on the SL2 or the R5, I borrowed and tested a bunch of other cameras from different manufacturers, right from Fuji, Panasonic, the Panasonic S1R, almost the twin of the SL2 in terms of its sensor, a slightly different output than the SL2, but pretty much has a lot of the ingredients from the SL2 in it, so cheaper alternative. So that seemed very attractive to me, so that's the one I tested first. But again, bulky, too many buttons, didn't like the ergonomics, and combined with the Panasonic lenses, which were very heavy. Even the f4 7200 f4 lens was as heavy as the Canon 7200 f2.8. So that left me thinking, and I was not very happy with its autofocus performance, at least the piece which I tried. I found the SL2's autofocus performance to be superior from the Panasonic S1R in my experience, and the way it might be slow, in terms of speed may be the same, but just a little bit more accurate. What else I tested the Fuji GFX cameras, the GFX 50S and the GFX 100S. The GFX 50S seemed like a very capable camera, very good glass, again 50 megapixel medium format sensor. Something like that would have costed an arm and a leg a few years back, but in an affordable package. Just the fact that it's so affordable made it a good look alternative. But again, I was not happy with the ergonomics, and I just found again I had to relearn too much, unlearning and learning to start using that camera. The GFX 100S was the most disappointing for me in terms of the ergonomics. The image quality seemed absolutely fine, 100 megapixel, all the resolution one would need, very good dynamic range as well. But again, the shooting experience was just not what I was looking for. So if I could ignore all that, maybe yes, I could probably use it as a tool. But for me, the shooting experience, the build, the ergonomics, everything is important. And the way that's built and the vertical grip, I just hated it. And also the way the EVF is removable EVF that is fixed on top seems a little fragile for me, and I'm not sure it would bear the kind of use that I usually use my cameras. So that was not for me. I was also considering the original SL, even though it's 24 megapixel, simply because of the quality of the glass. I could save some money on the body and buy some Leica glass, but then decided that my need for higher resolution won out, and over that argument I decided not to go for that. I also considered the Hasselblad X1D. The original one, obviously I tested it when I was traveling in New York. I tested it. I hated the way the shutter responded. It was very slow, clunky. The firmware was slow and buggy at the time, so opted out of that one. And finally even decided not to go for the X1D Mark II as well, even though it seemed like a much better improvement over the X1D. But where I live here in India, there is really no Hasselblad reseller, and I was just not sure what I could do with the camera if I had a problem with the camera or needed to get it serviced. So again, I couldn't consider that option. So the big question I guess you guys must be thinking is, why didn't I consider Sony? Probably it's because my experience with the initial Sony A7R was not so good in terms of the ergonomics and battery life, and I know that from the reviews I've seen that Sony has improved in terms of the shutter mechanism, the battery life, but in terms of menu system and ergonomics of the camera bodies, they still haven't changed that much since the original A7R, and that's the reason I never considered Sony. It's just not my cup of tea. Finally really came down to the S2 and the yet to be announced Canon R5. So I waited, watched, saw what the R5 was all about, and decided to go for the SL2. And another important factor in my decision was the fact that when you shift from Canon EF mount to the RF mount, even though we are within the Canon's brand, within the Canon's offerings, you still are changing your mount completely. You're going from EF mount to RF mount. Yes, there are adapters available. Yes, the EF mount lenses work almost as good as they do natively on the EF mount cameras on the RF bodies, but still you need an adapter. The center of gravity does shift, and again, if you go for RF glass, they're much more expensive, and the build quality is just not the same as the EF lenses. The RF lenses seem to be having more electronics in them, and they're not of a metal construction, they're like more of a plastic composite construction. So these are two things which led me thinking that the best thing for me is to get the SL2 body and adapt them temporarily with my existing EF mount glass, buy a couple of Panasonic S lenses which are certified by Leica in the next step, and then eventually slowly phase these lenses out and replace them with either Leica M lenses or SL lenses or even adapted S lenses. So that is what I have planned. So let's see how things work out. But at the moment, this is my Leica system, the Leica QP and the Leica SL2, and I will be making a video about my initial experiences shooting with the SL and how different it is from the Canon 5D Mark IV as a tool and as a camera, and also I will be talking about the image quality and whether it really meets my expectations. I did a shoot recently, so I can tell you this. I did a shoot recently, a portrait shoot, portfolio shoot for a singer and dancer. So in that I shot with the SL2 with the adaptive with the Panasonic Panasonic S24 105 lens mounted on natively on the SL2, and I also shot parallelly with my Canon 5D Mark IV with the EF mount art lenses which I have, and from that shoot, in terms of color science, I thought both were pretty well matched. They're different but well matched, both gave good outputs. But in terms of resolution and dynamic range and the malleability of the file and the autofocusing feature, wide open with some of my art lenses, my fast primes was actually more accurate on the SL2 than on the Canon 5D Mark IV. So that itself I thought is fitting to the SL2 for. So anyway, I will be making more videos, detailed videos about my experience with the SL2 with various lenses that I'm going to be using it with. So to summarize, for all those reasons above, I finally decided to transition to the L mount and specifically Leica for my photography, and possibly the Panasonic S1H down the line for my video requirements. But right now this is my system, Leica QP and the Leica SL2, and my 5D Mark IV is doing video duty. So hope you guys found that useful and interesting. Do keep watching my channel to see more videos about the art of photography and about photography gear, and don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon and share with your friends so that I can get some more views.